I truly loved my ex-fiancé, but 3 days before the wedding I vanished. I left no note, changed my number, and moved 3 states away. Everyone believes I had a mental breakdown, but the real reason I ran was simple. I finally realized I'd be marrying the wrong brother. That silence has haunted me for a decade. The brand new utility vehicle is officially yours, my dad announced with a smile, extending it to my brother as an engagement gift. I submitted my 2 weeks' notice exactly 3 months later. They were in dire straits. After a decade and a half of meticulously transforming my father's plumbing company into a thriving enterprise, I had to witness him present the keys to the service truck I used to my younger brother as an official engagement present. That was the pivotal moment I comprehended I'd never be truly valued, irrespective of my contributions. I'm Alex, 35 years old, and until just recently I served as the operational cornerstone of Wilson Family Plumbing. When the majority of my friends departed for college, I elected to remain to assist Dad in expanding the business. I absorbed every facet of the trade from the ground up, successfully clearing obstinate drains, mending leaking pipes, implementing complex systems, and managing highly agitated customers at 2 a.m. during winter emergencies. I essentially embodied the business while my father, Earl, progressively transitioned into a chiefly supervisory position. Dad initially started with nothing more than a van and a toolbox in his garage. Now we have, or more accurately they have, 8 trucks and a dozen employees. That remarkable growth wasn't magic or luck, it was the culmination of thousands of hours of my sweat, countless sacrificed weekends, and unwavering attention to solidifying our reputation within the community. Every positive review, every repeat customer, every referral, I had personally ensured their absolute satisfaction. My younger brother, Travis, came aboard 5 years ago at 28. He frequently behaves like a teenager who's being compelled to work in the family establishment. He's habitually late, takes excessively long lunches, and leaves jobs incomplete. The sheer volume of customer complaints I've had to diplomatically resolve following his visits is truly astonishing. While I'm available 24/7 for emergencies, Travis forgets his phone on weekends. Somehow, Dad always has an excuse ready. He's still acquiring the necessary proficiency, or not everyone possesses your natural talent, Alex. The warning signs were always conspicuously present. When I trained new hires, they'd often get elevated to a higher rank above me. When I pioneered a new scheduling system that enhanced our efficiency by a significant 30%, Travis received the full acknowledgement at our company meeting because he supported the initiative. When I suggested venture into commercial contracts, Dad rejected it as too risky, only to extol Travis's innovative thinking when he suggested the very same concept 6 months later. The financial disparities became absolutely intolerable to overlook. Dad had continuously pledged partnership for years, alluringly showcasing ownership stakes that never actually materialized. Meanwhile, I found out Travis was making a significant $15,000 more annually despite having fewer responsibilities and substantially less experience. I was driving a 2010 truck with 180,000 miles on it, while Dad and Travis comfortably navigated in vehicles less than 3 years old. I told myself that unquestioning loyalty mattered, that family comes first, that Dad would eventually recognize my indispensable contributions. I was wrong on all counts. My truck had been experiencing frequent malfunctions for months. The transmission was slipping, the suspension was deteriorated, and the cargo area had developed rust holes that permitted water to enter during rainstorms, consequently damaging expensive equipment. After a particularly severe failure that cost us a major client, Dad finally agreed we urgently required a new vehicle. That night, as I was inspecting the damage to my old truck, Dad came out to the garage with 2 beers in hand. He passed one to me and leaned against the workbench. For a moment, it felt like the old days before Travis joined the company, when Dad and I would troubleshoot problems together. "Do you recall when I taught you how to change the belt on the old Ford?" he asked, a rare smile mildly illuminating his weathered face. "You couldn't have been more than 12. I nodded, the memory washing over me. "You let me do the whole job while you supervised. Told me I had the steadiest hands you'd ever seen on a kid. Never seen anyone take to plumbing like you did, Alex." Authentic aptitude. He took a long sip of his beer, looking at the truck rather than at me. "This entire enterprise, it wouldn't be what it is without you." For that brief moment I felt genuinely appreciated, connected to him like I rarely did anymore. He clapped me on the shoulder before heading back inside, leaving me to wonder why these moments of recognition had become so exceedingly rare. Why couldn't he acknowledge my value when it actually mattered, in business decisions, in pay, in front of Travis? I spent weeks thoroughly researching options, balancing fuel efficiency with cargo capacity, finding the most advantageous deals, and preparing all the requisite purchase paperwork. I even arranged financing through our longtime bank. The truck would serve as my de facto mobile office for the next decade, so I wanted to get it right. That Sunday, Dad invited us all for dinner. Travis brought his girlfriend, Jessica, with whom he was recently engaged after dating for just 8 months. Mom prepared a feast and Dad seemed unusually cheerful. After dessert, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. My heart lifted, thinking he was finally going to acknowledge my hard work or announce the partnership we discussed. Instead, he pulled out a set of keys attached to a silver keychain with the company logo. With the biggest smile I'd seen in years, he handed them to Travis. "To assist you in commencing your new life, son," he announced. "This magnificent new company vehicle is yours. I had them add all the upgrades you wanted. Consider it an engagement present from your mother and me." The silence that followed felt like an indefinite duration. Travis grinned smugly while Jessica clapped her hands in unrestrained delight. They hadn't even noticed my expression. My mother busied herself clearing plates, pointedly avoiding my eyes. I finally managed to speak, my voice tight. "Dad, we discussed that truck for the service calls I handle. Travis doesn't even do emergency work." Dad waved dismissively. "You can keep using your current truck for a while longer. Travis needs to exhibit a professional image now that he'll be assuming responsibility for more client relationships. Besides, you know how to keep that old one running. You've always been good with repairs." I watched Travis playfully swing the keys, not even pretending to be grateful, already talking about how he might customize the paint job. The truck that should have been mine, that I critically required for my actual work, was now his latest amusement. On the drive home in my rattling, aging truck, something finally shattered inside me. It wasn't just about the vehicle, it was about 15 years of being overlooked, undervalued, and callously taken for granted. It was about realizing that no matter what I contributed, I would always be the reliable workhorse, while Travis would be the favored son. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through job listings, something I'd never seriously considered before. I called Jack, a former colleague who'd left to work for a competitor, asking innocuous questions about their operation. His response shocked me. "Alex, with your skills and client relationships, you could write your own ticket anywhere in the county. Seriously, what's kept you at your dad's place all these years?" For the first time, I realized that what I thought was loyalty had actually been facilitating my own mistreatment. I'd become so habituated to being undervalued that I'd forgotten my worth. Jack mentioned their company needed an experienced technician to lead their commercial division, exactly the opportunity I'd been systematically refused at my father's company. I spent the next week scrupulously documenting everything I handled. I created detailed instructions for all our systems, client preferences, maintenance schedules, supplier relationships, and emergency protocols. I updated our customer database with notes on every major client. I wasn't going to descend to their level by sabotaging the business, but I also wasn't going to leave them with any excuse to call me after I left. The following Monday, I arrived at the office early and placed an envelope on my father's desk. He arrived an hour later, casually late as usual. When he opened the envelope, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "A separation notification? Is this some kind of jest, Alex?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. I explained my decision calmly, professionally. I mentioned the truck incident only briefly, focusing instead on the repeated broken promises about partnership and my essential need for professional growth. "I have accepted a position with Brighton Plumbing Services." "You'll be back in a week," Dad scoffed. "They can't possibly match what we offer you here. This is just a tantrum about the truck, isn't it?" He didn't even bother to ask what they were paying me. If he had, he might have realized I would be making nearly 40% more, with benefits and a clear path to partnership within 2 years. The news spread quickly through the company. Travis cornered me in the supply room, his face flushed with panic rather than his usual smugness. "You can't just leave," he hissed. "Who's going to handle the West Side contracts, or the hospital maintenance, or the emergency calls?" For a brief moment, his confident facade entirely crumbled. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad's been grooming me to take over someday, but I don't know half of what you do. I never bothered to learn the systems. I'm not ready for this." The admission of incompetence surprised me, but it wasn't my problem anymore. For years he'd been happy to take credit while I did the work. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I replied. "After all, you've got a nice new truck to drive around in." Those 2 weeks were surprisingly liberating. I trained others on as many of my responsibilities as possible. I introduced key clients to their new technicians. I documented everything meticulously in a 3-ring binder that I labeled Essential Operations in bold marker. On my last day, I placed it on my father's desk, along with my company phone, credit card, and keys to the building. Dad barely acknowledged my departure. He was still convinced I'd come crawling back within days. Mom called that evening, tearfully asking me to reconsider, saying that family businesses have ups and downs, but we needed to stick together. I gently explained that I had stuck by them for 15 years while being unremittingly undervalued. This wasn't a hasty decision. I was 15 years overdue. The first month at Brighton was an illuminating revelation. My new boss, Kevin, introduced me as the best plumber in the county to clients and staff alike. My suggestions were not only heard but swiftly implemented. When I mentioned a better approach to commercial maintenance scheduling, Kevin asked me to develop it into a company-wide system and gave me resources to make it happen. Then came my first major test. Brighton had been bidding on the Lakeside Corporate Park contract for months without success. When Kevin mentioned they were making one final attempt, I realized I had critical inside information. Wilson Family Plumbing had serviced their buildings for years, and I knew exactly what issues they'd had and what their priorities were. With that knowledge, I could virtually guarantee Brighton would win the contract. But using that information felt wrong, a betrayal of client confidentiality, even if technically I hadn't signed anything preventing it. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. Brighton had given me everything my family business wouldn't: respect, fair compensation, opportunity. I wanted to prove my value, but not by compromising my principles. The next morning, I walked into Kevin's office and explained that while I couldn't share specific details about Lakeside Systems, I could help Brighton create a stronger general proposal based on my experience with similar properties. Kevin studied me for a long moment. "You realize most guys would have just exploited whatever advantage they had," he said finally. "Your unwavering moral uprightness is exactly why I hired you, Alex. We won the contract anyway, on the strength of our proposal rather than inside information." That moment cemented my place at Brighton more than any easy victory could have. Most surprisingly, I finished work at reasonable hours. No more midnight calls because Travis had botched a simple job. No more working through weekends because Dad had promised impossible deadlines without consulting me. I began reconnecting with old friends, took up hiking on Saturdays, and even started dating someone who wasn't exhausted from my constant work emergencies. Meanwhile, the fallout at Wilson Family Plumbing was swift and severe. Within 2 weeks, their Yelp rating had dropped from 4.8 to 3.2 stars. Customers who had specifically requested me were incensed to learn I'd left. The complex scheduling system I'd created, which no one else fully understood, began to fall apart, resulting in missed appointments and double bookings. The texts started rolling in by the third week, first from Travis: "How do I access the hospital maintenance records?" Then from Dad: "Where did you keep the warranty information for the Peterson job?" I responded with brief, professional directions to the documentation I'd left behind, but nothing more. A major crisis hit when Travis attempted to handle the quarterly maintenance at Riverside Medical Center, our largest commercial client. He forgot to shut off a main valve, causing flooding in a storage area. The hospital immediately terminated their contract, a $180,000 annual loss. That same week, 2 experienced technicians quit, citing the chaotic scheduling and lack of leadership. I later heard from Tom, one of those technicians who'd taken a job at a competitor, about what happened afterward. Travis had suffered a complete meltdown in the office, hurling tools across the workshop and screaming that he was being set up to fail. He'd accused Dad of throwing him into the deep end without proper training, of expecting him to instantly fill my shoes when he'd never been given the chance to learn. Tom described how Travis had finally collapsed onto a bench, head in his hands, muttering, "Alex made it look so easy." I never knew. I never bothered to know. Dad had apparently just stood there, pale and speechless, as the business he'd built crumbled around him. The facade of the Golden Sun was shattering under the weight of actual responsibility. The text from my family changed tone dramatically. "We need to communicate" became "kindly call us" became "the financial health of the business is in serious peril." Mom started calling Dad. Her messages were increasingly desperate. Travis's fiancée, Jessica, even reached out, saying he was stressed beyond belief and barely sleeping. I maintained my distance, focusing instead on flourishing in my new role. I closed 3 major commercial contracts in my first 2 months, earning a substantial bonus. With my increased salary and rational work hours, I was finally able to save enough for a down payment on a modest house. I also bought myself a new truck, not a company vehicle but my own, paid for with the fruits of my fairly compensated labor. Word travels fast in our industry. Suppliers who worked with both companies mentioned the decline of Wilson Family Plumbing in casual conversation. "I heard your father had to dismiss 3 more individuals," one mentioned while delivering parts. "Shame to see a business that's been around so long struggling like that." I maintained professional dignity, never bad-mouthing my family despite the temptation. After 3 months of silence between us, my father called on a Tuesday evening. His voice sounded different, older, defeated. "Alex, we need to talk in person. The business, it's not good." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, neutral territory. When Dad and Travis arrived, the physical transformation was shocking. Dad had lost weight, his usually immaculate appearance now disheveled. Travis looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, dark circles under his eyes, his typical swagger entirely absent. They laid out the dire situation: revenue down 60%, staff reduced to just 4 employees, the bank threatening to call their business loan, 3 trucks already sold to cover expenses. The new truck Travis had been so proud of was gone too, sacrificed to keep the lights on. Dad had even mortgaged his house to inject cash into the failing business. "We made mistakes, Alex," Dad admitted, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes. I took you for granted and now I'm paying the price." For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. Travis stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. Dad pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a partnership agreement, giving me 45% ownership, a substantial salary increase, and complete operational control. "Please," he whispered, "assist us in salvaging what remains." The old Alex would have jumped at this opportunity, eager to finally receive the recognition I'd craved for so long. But that version of me died the day they gave away my truck. Instead, I calmly explained that I wasn't interested in returning. I had found a place where my skills were valued from day one, not after catastrophic failure forced recognition. "I'm not trying to punish you," I explained. "I just finally understand my worth. I spent 15 years trying to earn something that should have been freely given: respect, fair compensation, recognition. I won't go backward. Travis finally spoke, his voice hollow. I didn't realize how much you were doing until you left. I thought running service calls was easy. I thought. He paused, swallowing hard. I thought Dad was playing favorites with you, giving you all the important work. I was wrong. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering. Instead, I offered what help I could, names of qualified plumbers who might join their restructured business, suggestions for streamlining to survive with a smaller operation, and advice on which clients they should prioritize to rebuild their reputation. This isn't about revenge, I told them. I didn't leave to hurt you. I left because I deserved better. 6 months later, Wilson Family Plumbing still exists, but as a shadow of its former self. Dad has stepped back significantly, considering early retirement. Travis has been forced to learn the trade properly, handling service calls himself rather than delegating everything. They operate just 3 trucks now, focusing on residential work after losing most commercial clients. We see each other at family gatherings, awkward at first but gradually finding a new normal. Mom finally stopped trying to guilt me into returning, especially after seeing my new house and hearing about my promotion to commercial division manager. Even Travis has developed a sort of begrudging respect, occasionally texting me technical questions, which I answer without resentment. For the first time in my adult life, I don't wake up with a knot in my stomach. I'm no longer the desperately loyal son seeking approval that never came. The heaviest burden I've ever carried wasn't the physical labor of plumbing work. It was the emotional weight of trying to earn love and respect from people who took me for granted. Sometimes walking away isn't about revenge. Sometimes it's the only path to self-respect. The greatest revenge I've learned isn't watching others fail after you leave. It's succeeding so completely that your absence becomes the measure of your worth. Last month, Kevin mentioned he's planning to open a second location in the neighboring county and wants me to run it. In time, he says, I could buy him out and make it my own company. I find myself mentally designing the logo, planning the service area, imagining the fleet of trucks all painted a different color than Wilson blue, not out of spite, but because I'm finally building something that's truly mine.